The air in the hall was thick with wine and malice. She stood beneath the chandeliers, her hands folded, her face calm as stone. Around her, laughter rose like smoke. The Alpha sat at the head of the table, his gaze fixed on nothing, his silence heavier than any word. Someone spoke her name with venom. The room held its breath. Before we dive into this story, leave your rating from 1 to 10 and tell us which city you're watching from. May this moment reach your heart. The dawn wind scraped against the stones like a warning. The city slept in its penumbra of rust and misery, but there was a point of light. A lantern trembling beneath the awning of an alley where blood was weighed like wine. There, among glass vials and damp cloths, she worked. The woman who sold blood. Her hands were thin, her wrist marked with blue. Each drop that fell in silence was the price of hunger. She sold what remained of her warmth to feed the children who dreamed without knowing what the future was. Her face, always hidden by a worn scarf, was known but never remembered. Men came in secret, left cold coins, and departed without looking at her. That night, the air was heavy, as if something breathed beneath the earth. The shadows of the columns seemed to watch. Then a different silence crossed the alley. The dogs ceased their howling. The wind, once constant, withdrew. That was when he appeared. The Alpha vampire. No name, only presence. His arrival was not seen but felt. The sound of his boots on stone was the exact measure of authority. He wore black as if the fabric itself were made of absence. The merchants scattered, the lanterns flickered, and time seemed to hold its breath. He stopped before her. "You come with me," the Alpha vampire murmured to the woman who sold blood to feed her children. There was no choice in that voice. It was an ancient sentence from a man who had forgotten what it meant to ask. She raised her gaze, and what she saw was something that cannot be named: power, solitude, and a hunger that was not human. Neither of them moved. Only the air between them vibrated, as if the world itself hesitated. The next morning, those who dared to speak swore they had seen her walking through the corridors of the castle on the hills, following behind the Lord of Shadows. The doors closed, and the murmur spread through the taverns and temples. The Alpha had taken a woman from the common people. The scandal grew like plague. Ladies of the court laughed in hiding. Priests murmured that she had profaned the sacred lineage. They said the blood woman would not survive the first moon, that she would be discarded, forgotten, perhaps silenced. But no one knew what happened on starless nights when the entire castle seemed to breathe a thick fear. She did not speak. She walked the corridors with her head bowed, collecting looks of contempt and whispers that dripped poison. The servants moved away. The ladies hid their faces in perfumed handkerchiefs. And yet, there was something in her, a dignity that did not bend, a silence that weighed more than the voices of nobles. It was the kind of calm that precedes ruin. The Alpha vampire watched her from afar. No one understood what kept him bound to that simple woman. He did not either. It was as if her presence both shamed and attracted him at the same time. The sound of her steps made the entire hall stiffen. When he entered, conversations died. Candles dimmed their flame. The air grew denser. And always in some corner there she was, motionless like part of the darkness. She had not always lived in shadow. Once she had known the smell of bread baking at dawn, the sound of her mother's voice calling her name across a field of wild grass. But that life had been taken by fever and famine, leaving her with 2 small mouths to feed and nothing but her own veins to offer the world. The city had swallowed her whole, made her invisible except when men needed what flowed beneath her skin. She had learned to make herself small, to move through crowds like water through cracks in stone. She had learned that survival meant silence. That love was a luxury she could not afford, that every drop she sold was a prayer her children might live to see another sunrise. The castle was different from anything she had known. Its corridors stretched like the ribs of some massive beast, cold and echoing. Light came filtered through windows of coloured glass, painting the floors in shades of amber and blood. The air smelled of old wood and something else, something ancient that made her skin prickle. She learned the rhythm of the place quickly, when to appear, when to vanish, which rooms to avoid, which faces meant danger. The servants spoke to her in whispers when they spoke at all, their eyes darting to make sure no one of importance was watching. The nobles ignored her completely, or worse, they stared through her as if she were made of air. At night, She lay in a room high in the eastern tower. A space too grand for what she was, but too stark to be comfortable. The bed was draped in velvet the colour of midnight, and through the window she could see the valley below. A patchwork of fields and forests disappearing into darkness. She thought of her children, left with a neighbour who had promised to care for them. She wondered if they cried for her, if they understood why she had gone. She wondered if she would ever see them again. Plotted narrative strategy for Gothic story development. I need to continue building the story while staying within the word count requirements. Each part should be 1,750,900 words. Let me continue developing the narrative, focusing on the woman's perspective, the tension with the alpha, and the social dynamics of the court. I need to maintain the Gothic poetic tone throughout. Let me continue the narrative, making sure to stay in. Third person limited from her perspective. Keep the language lyrical and sensory. Build emotional tension. Show the relationship developing between her and the alpha. Include the court's cruelty build. Toward the banquet scene, keep everything in English, with no foreign words. The alpha came to her on the third night. She heard him before she saw him, the deliberate cadence of his footsteps, the way the very air seemed to reorganize itself around his presence. He stood in the doorway, backlit by torchlight from the corridor, his face in shadow. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. She remained on the edge of the bed, her hands folded in her lap, her heart a drum against her ribs. "Why did you agree to come?" His voice was low, textured like smoke. "You did not ask," she said quietly. "You commanded." A pause. Then he stepped into the room and she saw his face clearly for the first time. It was a face carved from marble and moonlight, beautiful in the way that storms are beautiful, something to witness from a distance, something that could destroy you if you got too close. His eyes were dark, impossibly dark, and when they fixed on her, she felt the weight of centuries pressing down. "And if I had asked?" he said. She considered this. Around them, the castle breathed its ancient breath. "I would have come anyway. My children need to eat." Something flickered across his face. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. He moved to the window and stood there, looking out at the darkness. His shoulders were broad beneath the black coat he wore, his posture that of someone accustomed to carrying burdens no one else could see. "They will be cared for," he said. "I have arranged it." Her throat tightened. "Why?" He did not answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet she almost missed it. "Because you asked for nothing." He left after that, and she sat alone in the vast room, trying to understand what had just happened. Outside, an owl called. The wind moved through the valley like a living thing. She pulled the velvet coverlet around her shoulders and waited for sleep that would not come. Days became weeks. She learned the architecture of silence, the way it filled spaces like water filling a basin. The castle had its own language, creaking floorboards that warned of approaching footsteps, drafts that announced open doors, the quality of light that told her what time of day it was without needing to see the sun. She moved through this world like a ghost, present but not acknowledged, existing in the margins of other people's lives. The ladies of the court were worst. They wore their cruelty like perfume, subtle and pervasive. They would pause their conversations when she entered a room, their eyes sliding over her with practiced disdain. They spoke in low voices about bloodlines and breeding, about the sanctity of ancient families and the pollution that came from mixing with common stock. Their laughter was sharp as broken glass. Lady Evelina was the cruelest. She was beautiful in the way that ice is beautiful, cold and perfect and hard. Her hair was the colour of spun gold, her skin like porcelain, her gowns works of art that cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. She held court among the other nobles like a queen among courtiers, and her word was law in the social realm of the castle. When she looked at the blood woman, her lip would curl almost imperceptibly, a gesture so subtle that anyone watching might miss it. But the woman who sold blood never did. "I hear she used to ply her trade in the market," Lady Evelina said one afternoon, her voice carrying across the solar where several ladies sat with their needlework, selling herself by the cupful. "How very enterprising," laughter rippled through the room. The blood woman kept her eyes on the tapestry she was mending, her needle moving in and out with steady precision. She had learned this art from her mother. how to make invisible repairs, how to restore beauty without leaving a trace of your own touch. It seemed fitting somehow. One wonders what other services she provided, another lady added, and the laughter grew louder. The blood woman's hands did not shake. She completed her stitch, knotted the thread, cut it clean. Then she rose, folded the tapestry, and left the room without a word. Behind her, the laughter followed like hounds. She found sanctuary in the castle library, a vast chamber lined floor to ceiling with books that smelled of leather and dust and secrets. Here, at least, she could be alone. The librarian was an old man who had gone nearly blind, and he welcomed her presence with a gentle nod, asking nothing, expecting nothing. She would sit in the window seat overlooking the gardens and read books about places she would never see, lives she would never live, possibilities that existed only in ink and imagination. It was there that the Alpha found her one evening, as the light was fading from amber to violet. She looked up from her book to find him standing in the doorway, watching her with that inscrutable expression he wore like armor. "You read," he said. It was not a question, but she answered anyway. "My mother taught me. She said stories were the only wealth that could never be stolen." He moved into the room, his steps silent on the thick carpet. "What are you reading?" She showed him the spine, a collection of poetry from a century past, verses about love and loss and the passage of time. He took the book from her hands, his fingers brushing hers for just a moment. The touch was electric, unexpected. He opened to a random page and read aloud, his voice transforming the words into something living. "We are all shadows, cast by light we cannot see, reaching for warmth in a world grown cold. What is love but the brief defiance of darkness, the foolish hope that we are not alone?" He closed the book and handed it back to her. Their eyes met, and for a moment, something passed between them, understanding perhaps, or recognition of a shared solitude. Then he turned and left, and she was alone again with her shadows and her words. The first formal banquet came on the night of the winter moon. The great hall was transformed into something out of legend, hundreds of candles burning in elaborate candelabras, tables laden with food and drink, musicians playing in the gallery above. The nobles arrived in their finest clothes, a parade of silk and jewels and carefully curated beauty. The blood woman wore a simple dress of dark blue, the only gown that had been provided for her. She stood near the wall hoping to be invisible, but invisibility was no longer possible. The Alpha sat at the head of the high table, magnificent and terrible in black velvet that seemed to absorb the light. To his right sat Lord Marcus, his chief advisor, a man with silver hair and calculating eyes. To his left, conspicuously empty, was a chair that everyone understood was meant for her. She did not move toward it. She could feel the weight of every gaze in the room. The speculation, the judgment, the barely concealed contempt. "Come," the Alpha said, and though he did not raise his voice, it carried across the hall with absolute clarity. She walked the length of that room like a woman walking to her execution. Every step was measured, every breath deliberate. The silence was so complete she could hear the rustle of her own dress, the whisper of her shoes on stone. When she reached the high table, she did not look at anyone. She simply took her seat, folded her hands in her lap, and waited. The feast began. Courses came and went, roasted meats and delicate pastries, wines that glowed ruby in the candlelight, fruits from distant lands that tasted of summer and sunshine. The blood woman ate sparingly, her appetite strangled by anxiety. Around her, conversation flowed and ebbed. The nobles spoke of politics and property, of marriages and alliances, of matters that existed in a world she did not understand and could not enter. Lady Evelina sat across the table, resplendent in cloth of gold, her eyes bright with malice. She laughed at something Lord Marcus said, a crystalline sound that made others turn to admire her. Then her gaze fell on the blood woman, and her smile sharpened. "Tell us," Lady Evelina said, her voice cutting through the chatter like a blade. "How does one transition from selling in the market to dining in the castle? It must be quite an adjustment." The conversation died. All eyes turned to the blood woman, who sat very still, her face composed. The Alpha's hand, resting on the table, curled slowly into a fist. "I imagine," Lady Evelina continued, "that the blood you once sold now graces our very table. How deliciously ironic. Laughter erupted around them, not genuine mirth, but the performative cruelty of those who sense weakness and move to exploit it. The blood woman felt the heat rising in her cheeks, but she did not look away. She met Lady Evelina's gaze with steady eyes. "It is blood from someone who lives," she said quietly. "It is what I had left to give," the laughter faltered. There was something in her voice, not defiance exactly, but a kind of simple truth that cut through all the artifice and pretension. She had nothing left to lose, no dignity to preserve, no reputation to protect. She was exactly what they said she was, and she did not apologize for it. Lord Marcus leaned forward, his expression one of amused interest. "But surely you understand the impropriety? The bloodlines of our kind have been kept pure for centuries. To introduce common blood into the castle is to invite corruption." "Is my blood corrupt?" she asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. "All common blood is corrupt," Lord Marcus said smoothly. "It lacks the refinement, the strength, the purity that comes from generations of careful breeding." The alpha had not moved. He sat perfectly still, his face a mask, but the tension radiating from him was palpable. The blood woman could feel it, could sense the leashed violence in him, the fury barely contained, and yet he said nothing. He simply watched, waited, let the moment unfold. "Then I am corrupt," the blood woman said. "But corruption kept my children alive. Corruption put food in their mouths when there was none to be had. Corruption meant they slept warm when winter came. If that is what corruption means, then I will wear it gladly." The silence that followed was absolute. Even Lady Evelina seemed momentarily at a loss for words. The blood woman had not raised her voice, had not shown anger or shame or any of the emotions they expected. She had simply stated a fact, as undeniable as the rising of the sun. The alpha stood. The sound of his chair scraping against stone was like thunder. He walked around the table until he stood behind her chair and the entire hall held its breath. His hand came to rest on her shoulder, light as air, heavy as iron. "Let me make something clear," he said, his voice quiet but carrying to every corner of the room. "This woman sits at my table because I have placed her there. What she was, what she did, what blood runs in her veins, none of that concerns any of you. And if I hear one more word spoken against her, one more jest at her expense, one more look of contempt—" He paused, letting the threat crystallize in the silence. "Well, let us simply say that my patience has limits, and you would be wise not to test them." He returned to his seat, and the feast continued. But something had changed. The laughter was more subdued now, the conversations more careful. Lady Evelina sat with her wineglass held like a weapon, her smile fixed and cold. Lord Marcus watched the alpha with narrowed eyes, his mind clearly working through the implications of what had just occurred. The blood woman sat very still. The alpha's hand on her shoulder had been the lightest of touches, but she could still feel it, burning through the fabric of her dress like a brand. He had defended her, but she understood what it had cost him. Power was a fragile thing, built on perception and fear and the willingness of others to submit. By defending her publicly, he had revealed something. Not weakness, exactly, but a crack in the armor, a point of vulnerability that his enemies could exploit. She did not thank him. She did not look at him. She simply continued eating, though the food tasted like ash in her mouth. The banquet ended late into the night. The nobles dispersed to their chambers, their conversations buzzing with speculation and scandal. The blood woman returned to her tower room alone, her feet aching from the evening's ordeal. She lit a candle and sat by the window, looking out at the valley below. The moon was full, painting everything in shades of silver and shadow. Somewhere out there her children slept. She wondered if they dreamed of her. A knock at the door. She knew who it was before she answered. The alpha stood in the corridor, still dressed in his formal clothes, looking as composed as ever. But there was something different in his eyes. A weariness, perhaps, or a resignation. "May I come in?" he asked. She stepped aside. He entered and she closed the door behind him. For a moment, they stood in the candlelit room, two figures casting long shadows on the walls. "You did not have to do that," she said. "Yes," he said. "I did. They will hate you for it. They will see it as weakness." "Let them." He moved to the window and stood where she had been standing, looking out at the same view. "Do you know what I am?" "A vampire," she said, "an alpha, a lord." "I am alone," he said quietly. "I have been alone for longer than you can imagine. I am surrounded by people who fear me, who obey me, who would die at my command, but I am alone. And then you appeared, this woman with nothing, asking for nothing, giving everything. And I realized that I had forgotten what it meant to feel anything other than the weight of power." She moved to stand beside him. Below, the world slept. Above, stars wheeled in their ancient patterns. "I am not a cure for loneliness," she said. "I am not even certain I am a person anymore. I am just someone who survived." He turned to face her. In the candlelight, his face was softer, more human. "You are more than that. You are the only honest thing in this castle. Everyone else wears masks, plays games, schemes and plots. But you are simply yourself? Do you have any idea how rare that is?" She wanted to laugh, but it came out as something closer to a sob. "Myself is nothing. Myself is a woman who sold her blood to feed her children. Myself is common and corrupt, and everything they say I am." "No." His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb tracing the line of her cheekbone. "You are someone who loved her children more than her own life. You are someone who survived when survival should have been impossible. You are someone who sits at a table full of vipers and speaks the truth without fear. That is not nothing. That is everything." The distance between them collapsed. His mouth found hers, and the kiss was both gentle and desperate, a drowning man reaching for air. She responded without thinking, her hands finding the fabric of his coat, pulling him closer. For that moment, nothing else existed. Not the castle, not the court, not the judgment, or the scorn, or the impossible gulf between what they were and what they might become. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard. He rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I cannot promise you anything," he whispered. "I cannot promise safety or happiness or even survival. This world is cruel and my enemies are many." "I know," she said. "I have never asked for promises. Then what do you ask for?" She thought about this. Outside, the wind moved through the valley like a sigh. "Just this. These moments, however many we are given." He kissed her again, and this time it was slower, deeper, a conversation without words. They moved toward the bed, shedding layers of cloth and pretense, finding each other in the darkness. There was no violence in it, no cruelty, only a desperate tenderness, a need to be known and seen and held. They came together like two people who had been cold for too long, seeking warmth in the only place it could be found. Afterward, they lay tangled in the velvet coverlet, her head on his chest, his hand stroking her hair with unconscious gentleness. She could hear his heart beating, slower than a human heart, but beating nonetheless. Proof that he was, despite everything, alive. "Your children," he said. "Tell me about them." So she did. She spoke about her daughter, small and fierce, with eyes that missed nothing. She spoke about her son, gentle and dreamy, who loved stories the way some people loved wine. She spoke about the life they had lived before, the poverty and the struggle. Yes, but also the small joys, the moments of laughter. The way her daughter would climb into her lap and fall asleep with her thumb in her mouth. The way her son would ask questions about the stars and listen with rapt attention to her answers. She spoke until her voice grew hoarse and the candle burned low, and the darkness outside began to lighten toward dawn. He listened. He did not interrupt, did not offer platitudes or false reassurances. He simply held her and listened, and somehow that was enough. When the first birds began to sing, he kissed her forehead and rose to dress. She watched him from the bed. This man who had taken her from everything she knew and given her nothing but uncertainty and danger and this strange, fragile connection that might shatter at any moment. "Will you regret this?" she asked. He paused in the doorway, his hand on the frame. "I regret many things. This will not be one of them." Then he was gone, and she was alone with the growing light and the memory of his touch still warm on her skin. The weeks that followed were a study in contrasts. Publicly, nothing had changed. The Alpha remained remote and commanding, his interactions with the Blood Woman formal and distant. She continued her quiet existence on the margins of castle life, mending tapestries and reading in the library and avoiding the scrutiny of the court. But at night, he came to her tower room, and in those stolen hours they built something fragile and precious. Not quite love, perhaps, but something like it. A mutual recognition, a shelter from the storm. The court, of course, noticed. Court always noticed. Whispers spread like wildfire through the corridors and chambers. The servants spoke in hushed voices about the light burning late in the eastern tower. The nobles exchanged meaningful glances and thinly veiled innuendos. Lady Evelina's contempt crystallized into something harder and more dangerous. She began gathering allies, other nobles who saw the Alpha's fascination with the Blood Woman as an opportunity to undermine his authority. Lord Marcus was particularly concerned. He came to the Alpha's chambers one afternoon, his expression grave. "My lord," he said, "we need to discuss the situation with the woman." The Alpha looked up from the documents he had been reviewing. "There is no situation. With respect, there is. The court is in an uproar. Questions are being raised about your judgment, your fitness to lead. The bloodlines are no concern of mine," the Alpha interrupted. "I did not ask for your opinion, Marcus. But you have it nonetheless. She is a distraction. Worse, she is a weakness. Your enemies will use her against you." "Let them try." Lord Marcus leaned forward, his voice dropping to a more confidential tone. "Listen to me. I have served your family for 3 generations. I have seen lords rise and fall, dynasties crumble, power shift like sand. And I am telling you, this woman is dangerous. Not because of what she is, but because of what she makes you. Human." The word hung in the air between them. The Alpha's expression did not change, but something flickered in his eyes. Anger, perhaps, or recognition of an uncomfortable truth. "Get out," he said quietly. "My lord, get out." Lord Marcus left, but the words remained. Human. As if that were the worst thing one could be. That night, the Alpha did not come to her tower room. The Blood Woman waited, but the hours passed and the dawn came and her bed remained empty except for her own small form. She told herself it meant nothing. He had duties, responsibilities, demands on his time that she could not begin to comprehend. But doubt crept in anyway, cold and insidious as winter fog. 3 more nights passed. Still, he did not come. She saw him from a distance, in the great hall, in the corridors, always surrounded by advisors and petitioners and the machinery of power. He did not look at her. He did not acknowledge her existence. It was as if those nights had never happened, as if the connection they had built was nothing more than moonlight and shadow dissolving in the harsh light of day. On the 4th night, she could bear it no longer. She left her tower room and walked through the sleeping castle until she found his chambers. 2 guards stood outside, massive men with expressionless faces. They did not move to stop her as she approached, but they did not move to let her pass either. "I need to see him," she said. "The Lord is not receiving visitors. Please, it will only take a moment." The guard's expression did not change. "The Lord is not receiving visitors." She stood there for a long moment, weighing her options. She could plead, but that would accomplish nothing except her own humiliation. She could force her way past, but that would be suicide. So she did the only thing she could do. She turned and walked away, her dignity intact but her heart crumbling. She made it halfway back to her tower before the tears came. She leaned against a stone wall and wept silently, her shoulders shaking, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She wept for herself, for her children, for the foolishness of believing that she could be anything more than what she was. She wept for the touch of his hand and the warmth of his voice and the illusion of safety she had allowed herself to feel. "Why are you crying?" She spun around. Lady Evelina stood in the corridor, a vision in white silk, her expression one of cold curiosity. "It is nothing," the Blood Woman said, wiping her eyes. "Oh, but it clearly is something. Let me guess. Our dear Lord has tired of his little experiment. How predictable." Lady Evelina stepped closer, her perfume overwhelming in the confined space. "Did you really think it would be different, that you were special? You poor deluded creature. Men like him do not love women like you. They use you, amuse themselves with you, and then they discard you. It is the natural order of things. I never expected love. Then what did you expect? Gratitude, respect? You are a blood seller, darling. That is all you are, all you will ever be. And the sooner you accept that, the easier this will become. The blood woman looked at Lady Evelina, at her perfect face and perfect hair and perfect life built on the suffering of others, and felt something shift inside her. Not anger exactly, something colder and more permanent. You are right, she said quietly. I'm a blood seller. I sold my blood to keep my children alive. What have you ever sacrificed? What have you ever given up? You stand there in your silk and your jewels and your certainty, and you think that makes you better than me. But all it makes you is comfortable. And comfort is not the same as strength. Lady Evelina's smile faltered. How dare you? I am done. The blood woman straightened, squaring her shoulders. I am done apologizing for surviving. I am done feeling shame for doing what I had to do. You want me to leave? I will leave. But not because you told me to. Because I choose to. She walked past Lady Evelina, her head high, her steps steady. Behind her, she heard a hiss of outrage, but she did not look back. She returned to her tower room, gathered her few possessions, and prepared to leave the castle. But when dawn came, so did he. The Alpha stood in her doorway, looking as if he had not slept in days. His hair was disheveled, his clothes rumpled, his eyes haunted. Do not go, he said. She continued folding the blue dress. Why not? You have made your position clear. I was afraid. The words seemed to cost him something. I was afraid of what they would say, what they would do. I was afraid of appearing weak. So I stayed away, thinking that would protect you. Protect us both. But I was wrong. Yes, she said. You were. He entered the room, closing the door behind him. I cannot be what you need. I cannot be gentle or kind or understanding. I am what I am, a monster in human form, a creature of darkness and blood. But when I am with you, I remember what it was like to be something more. And I do not want to lose that. She set down the dress and turned to face him. What are you asking for? Stay, not because I command it, not because you have no choice, but because you want to. Stay and let me try to be worthy of you. The silence stretched between them. Outside, the sun was rising, painting the world in shades of gold and amber. The blood woman thought of her children, safe and cared for in the city below. She thought of the life she had left behind, the poverty and fear and endless grinding struggle. She thought of what she had become in this place, neither victim nor victor, but something in between. Someone finding her own strength in the darkness. I will stay, she said finally. But understand this, I am not staying for you. I am staying for myself. Because I deserve more than hiding in towers and weeping in corridors. If I stay as myself. No apologies, no shame. No pretending to be less than I am. Something like relief flickered across his face. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled her into his arms, holding her with a desperation that belied his usual control. She let herself be held, let herself feel the solid warmth of him, the reality of his presence. Then stay as yourself, he whispered into her hair, and I will try to be worthy of that gift. They stood there as the sun rose higher, 2 figures clinging to each other against the inevitable tide of judgment and scorn, and the world's cruelty. It was not a happy ending. It was barely even a beginning. But it was theirs, and for the moment, that was enough. The castle adjusted to the new reality slowly, grudgingly. The blood woman no longer hid in shadows. She walked the corridors with her head high, meeting the stares of nobles and servants alike with calm indifference. She attended meals in the Great Hall, sitting at the Alpha's side not as a concubine or mistress, but as something the court could not quite define or dismiss. She was simply there, present and undeniable. A constant reminder that their tidy hierarchies were not as immutable as they believed. Lady Evelina remained her most dedicated adversary, but even her cruelty became less effective over time. The blood woman had learned the most powerful lesson of all, that she did not need their approval to exist, did not need their acceptance to have value. Their opinions, once so devastating, became merely noise, background static that could be acknowledged and then ignored. The Alpha, for his part, made no further public declarations of devotion or protection. He did not need to. His actions spoke clearly enough. He sought her counsel on matters of state, listened to her observations about the court, trusted her judgment in ways that baffled his advisors. She had a mind sharpened by survival, an understanding of human nature gained through years of watching from the margins. She saw things others missed, understood motivations others overlooked. Lord Marcus found this particularly galling. He had been the Alpha's right hand for decades, his influence second only to the Lord himself. Now he found himself competing with a woman who had no title, no bloodline, no formal authority, and losing. His resentment festered like an infected wound, growing darker and more dangerous with each passing day. The Blood Woman was not naive. She knew Marcus was plotting something. She saw it in the way he watched her when he thought she was not looking, heard it in the whispered conversations that stopped when she entered a room. She mentioned her concerns to the Alpha, but he dismissed them. "Marcus is loyal," he said. "He has served my family for generations." "Loyalty is not the same as devotion," she replied. "And devotion can curdle into obsession. He sees me as a threat to his position." "You are a threat to everyone's position. That is why they fear you." She was not comforted by this. Fear was a dangerous thing. It made people desperate, and desperate people did desperate things. Her intuition proved correct. The assassination attempt came on a night when the Alpha was away, attending to matters in the Northern Territories. The Blood Woman was alone in her tower room when she heard the door open. She looked up expecting a servant and instead saw a figure in dark clothing, face hidden by a mask. She did not scream. Screaming would accomplish nothing. Instead, she grabbed the candlestick from her bedside table and threw it at the intruder's head. The aim was true. Years of precise movements, of hands trained to steadiness, paid off. The figure stumbled and she used that moment to run for the door. She almost made it. The intruder recovered faster than she expected, grabbing her arm and spinning her around. A knife flashed in the dim light. She twisted away, felt the blade slice through her sleeve and bite into her shoulder. Blood welled up, hot and immediate. Her blood. The thing she had sold for years, now spilling for free. The irony might have been funny if she had time to think about it. They struggled. The intruder was stronger, but she was desperate, and desperation had its own strength. She bit down on the hand holding the knife, tasted leather and salt. The grip loosened. She wrenched free and ran into the corridor, leaving a trail of red droplets behind her like breadcrumbs in a dark fairy tale. The castle came alive with sound. Shouts, running footsteps, doors slamming open. Guards appeared, swords drawn, surrounding the intruder. The figure was captured, mask ripped away to reveal not a professional assassin, but a young noble, barely more than a boy, his face twisted with righteous conviction. "Corruption," he spat at her. "You bring corruption to this house." The Blood Woman pressed her hand against her wounded shoulder and said nothing. What was there to say? He believed what he believed, and no words of hers would change that. Lord Marcus arrived, his expression carefully arranged into concern. "My lady, are you hurt?" "Thank the old gods the guards arrived in time." She looked at him, really looked at him. And in that moment she knew with absolute certainty that he had orchestrated this. Not directly, he was too clever for that, but through whispers and suggestions, through carefully planted ideas about corruption and pollution and the necessity of protecting the bloodlines. He had weaponized someone else's fanaticism and pointed it at her. "Yes," she said quietly. "Thank the gods." The Alpha returned at dawn, riding hard through the night when word reached him. He burst into her chamber where she sat being tended by the physician, her shoulder bandaged, her face pale but composed. For a moment they simply looked at each other. Then he was kneeling beside her chair, his hands framing her face, his eyes searching hers with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You are hurt," he said unnecessarily. "I am alive," she corrected. "Who did this?" She told him everything. The attack, the young noble's words, her suspicions about Marcus. He listened without interrupting, his face growing darker with each word. When she finished, he stood and turned to the guards who had followed him in. "Bring me Marcus." "Now." "My lord," one of the guards began. "Now." They scattered. The Alpha paced the room like a caged wolf, his control visibly fraying. The Blood Woman watched him, understanding that she was witnessing something rare. The moment when power becomes personal, when politics becomes vendetta. Lord Marcus arrived with his usual dignity intact, his expression carefully neutral. "My lord, I came as soon as... Did you order this?" "Order what? The assassination attempt?" "My lord, I am deeply offended that..." "Do not lie to me." The Alpha's voice was so quiet it was almost inaudible, but it carried a weight that made everyone in the room freeze. "I have known you my entire life. I know when you are lying." Marcus drew himself up. "Fine, yes, I arranged it. Not the specifics, I am not fool enough to directly order such a thing. But I made sure certain people understood that the woman was a cancer that needed to be removed. For the good of the bloodline. For the good of us all." The Blood Woman felt strangely disconnected from her body, as if she were watching this scene from a great distance. She had been right. It should have felt like vindication. Instead, it just felt tired. "You tried to kill her," the Alpha said. "I tried to save you from yourself. You have become weak, distracted, compromised. This woman has unmanned you, turned you into something soft and human. The court laughs behind your back. Your enemies sharpen their knives. And all because you cannot control your baser instincts." "Control," the Alpha laughed, a sound like breaking ice. "You think this is about control? You think I kept her close because I could not master my desires? You understand nothing. Then enlighten me." The Alpha turned to look at the Blood Woman, and in his eyes she saw something that took her breath away. Not love. She was not sure he was capable of love, but recognition, understanding, the acknowledgement of another soul in a world of shadows. "She reminds me that there is a cost to power," he said. "That every decision I make has consequences for people I will never meet, sacrifices I will never have to make. She sold her blood to feed her children while I sat in my castle and dispensed judgment. She survived poverty that would have killed me in a week. She has more strength in her smallest finger than this entire court has in all its combined bodies. And you call that corruption? You call that weakness? You are a fool, Marcus. An old, tired fool who has forgotten that power without humanity is just cruelty." Lord Marcus's face had gone white. "You would destroy everything for this peasant? Everything your family built?" "No," the Alpha said. "I would destroy everything to protect her. And if you cannot understand the difference, then you have already lost." He gestured to the guards. "Take him to the dungeons. He will stand trial for conspiracy to commit murder." "You cannot do this," Marcus said, but there was desperation in his voice now. "I have served your family for 3 generations. I have earned. You have earned nothing but my contempt. Take him away." The guards moved forward. Marcus struggled, shouting about loyalty and betrayal and the natural order. But his words became distant echoes as he was dragged from the room. The door closed. Silence fell like snow. The Alpha returned to kneel beside the Blood Woman. He took her hand, the one not pressed against her wounded shoulder, and held it gently. "I am sorry," he said. "I should have listened. I should have protected you better." "You cannot protect me from the world," she said. "No one can. We can only face it together or alone. I prefer together." He kissed her knuckles, a gesture of such tenderness it made her throat tighten. "Together, then." The physician finished bandaging her shoulder and left them alone. Dawnlight filled the room, painting everything in shades of rose and gold. The Blood Woman felt exhausted, hurt, but also strangely triumphant. She had survived another night. She was still here. "What will happen now?" she asked. "Marcus will be tried and likely exiled. The young noble who attacked you will face punishment. And the court..." He paused, considering. "The court will adjust. They always do. Power abhors a vacuum, and I will make sure they understand that you are under my protection. Not as property, not as a curiosity, as someone I have chosen to stand beside me. They will never accept me. I do not need them to accept you. I need them to respect you, and respect can be taught." She wanted to believe him, but she had seen too much of the world's cruelty to be entirely optimistic. Still, for this moment, in this room with the dawn breaking outside and his hand warm in hers, she allowed herself to hope. The trial of Lord Marcus became the event of the season. The great hall was packed with nobles and courtiers, all eager to witness the downfall of one of the most powerful men in the realm. Marcus stood before the Alpha's throne with his chin raised, defiant even in defeat. He refused to apologize, refused to show remorse. In his mind, he had done what was necessary, and history would vindicate him. The Alpha sentenced him to exile, permanent banishment from the kingdom, his lands and titles forfeit, his name stricken from the records of great families. It was a mercy, really. Many in the hall expected execution, but the Alpha was making a point that even traitors could be shown mercy, that power did not require cruelty. Marcus left in chains, and the court whispered about weakness and sentimentality, but the Alpha did not care. He had made his choice, and he would live with the consequences. The Blood Woman watched from her place beside the throne. She wore a gown of deep crimson now, a gift from the Alpha, and around her throat hung a pendant of silver and ruby that marked her as under his protection. She still felt like an imposter, dressed in borrowed finery, playing a role she had not auditioned for. But she had learned to wear the mask, to project the calm authority that others expected. After the trial, there was a feast. The nobles were carefully polite now, their cruelty muted by self-preservation. They understood that the world had shifted, that new rules applied. Lady Evelina was notably absent. She had left court shortly after the assassination attempt, claiming illness, but everyone knew it was disgrace. The Blood Woman sat beside the Alpha and accepted the false smiles and hollow compliments with grace. She had become skilled at reading the subtext, understanding what was said beneath what was said. It was not so different from her days in the market, really. Different clothing, different stakes, but the same fundamental game. Late that night, when the feast finally ended and the castle settled into sleep, she and the Alpha walked through the gardens. It was spring now, and the air smelled of lilac and new grass. Moonlight painted everything in silver, and somewhere in the distance a nightingale sang. "Do you regret it?" he asked. "All of this?" She considered the question seriously. Did she regret leaving her children, even though they were safe and provided for? Did she regret entering this world of politics and poison? Did she regret binding herself to a man who could destroy her with a word? "I regret that I had no choice," she said finally. "I regret that poverty gave me no options. I regret that my children are growing up without me. But do I regret you?" "No, not yet." He smiled at that, a real smile, rare and precious. "Not yet. I will take that as a victory." They walked in silence for a while, following paths between hedges of blooming roses. The Blood Woman thought about her life, about the strange trajectory that had brought her from selling blood in alleys to walking in moonlit gardens with creatures of legend. It still felt unreal, like a dream that might dissolve at any moment. "I want to see them," she said suddenly. "My children. I want to know they are truly all right." He nodded. "We will arrange it. Discreetly, so as not to draw attention. But yes, you should see them." Relief flooded through her. She had not realized how much she needed to hear him say that, how much she had feared he would deny her. "Thank you," she whispered. He stopped walking and turned to face her. In the moonlight, his face was softer, more human. "You do not have to thank me. They are your children. You have every right to see them, but you could prevent it. You have that power." "Yes," he acknowledged, "but I would not. Because unlike Marcus and the others, I understand that power means nothing if it requires you to be cruel. Power without conscience is just tyranny, and I have been a tyrant long enough." She reached up and touched his face, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingers. He closed his eyes at her touch, leaning into it like a cat seeking warmth. "What are we?" she asked. "What is this between us?" He opened his eyes and looked at her with an intensity that made her shiver. "I do not know. I do not have words for it. It is not love. I am not sure I am capable of love, but it is something. A recognition, a need. You are the only person in this world who sees me as something other than a monster or a means to an end. And He paused, searching for words. "I want to be worthy of that vision. I want to be the man you see when you look at me, not the creature everyone else fears." "You are both," she said softly. "Monster and man. That is the truth of you. And you are not afraid?" "Of course I'm afraid. I would be a fool not to be. But I am also here, and that means something." He kissed her then. under the moonlight and the stars, surrounded by the scent of roses and the song of nightingales. It was a kiss that tasted of hope and fear, and the strange alchemy that happens when two broken people find each other in the darkness. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathless. He rested his forehead against hers, his hands tangled in her hair. "Stay," he whispered. "Not because you must, not because you have nowhere else to go, but because you choose to. Choose me, choose us, choose this impossible, improbable thing we are building together." "I already have," she said. "The moment I decided not to run, I chose. Every day I wake up in that tower room, I choose. Every time I walk these corridors with my head high, I choose. You do not need to ask for what you already have." He smiled against her skin, and she felt it more than saw it. "Then let me ask for something else. Let me ask that you trust me. Not blindly, I would never ask for blind trust, but trust that I am trying. Trust that when I fail, I will learn. Trust that this is not a game or a phase or a whim. Trust that you matter." "I matter," she repeated, tasting the words. They felt strange on her tongue, foreign and new. She had never mattered before. Not to the world, not to fate, not to the grand sweep of history. She had been invisible, disposable, a footnote in someone else's story. But here, now, in this garden with this impossible man, she mattered. The realization was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. "You matter," he confirmed. "More than you know, more than I can articulate, and I will spend whatever time we have proving it to you." They returned to the castle as the moon set and the first hints of dawn painted the eastern sky. The blood woman felt lighter somehow, as if something she had been carrying had been set down. The future was still uncertain. Enemies still lurked in shadows. The world was still cruel and beautiful and strange. But for tonight, for this moment, she had found something like peace. The arranged visit with her children happened a week later. The Alpha provided a carriage and guards, ensuring her safety on the journey into the city. She wore simple clothes for the occasion, not wanting to appear before her children as some grand lady they would not recognize. She wanted to be their mother, not a stranger in silk. They met in a small house on the edge of the city, a place the Alpha had purchased and provided to the woman who had taken in her children. When the door opened and she saw them standing there, taller than she remembered, their faces thinner but healthy, her heart nearly broke. "Mama!" Her daughter ran to her and she caught the girl in her arms, holding her so tightly she feared she might crush her. Her son followed, more reserved but no less happy, and she pulled him into the embrace as well. They clung to each other, the three of them, and for a long moment, nothing else existed. No castle, no court, no Alpha or vampires or political machinations. Just a mother and her children, reunited after too long apart. When they finally pulled apart, the blood woman knelt so she could look into their faces properly. Her daughter's eyes were bright with tears. Her son was trying to be brave, his jaw set in a way that reminded her painfully of their father, dead now these many years. "Are you all right?" her daughter asked. "The lady said you were working at a big house, but she would not tell us more." "I am all right," the blood woman assured her. "I am safe, I am fed. And I am working so that you can have good lives. But when will you come home?" her son asked. The question hit her like a physical blow. How could she explain? How could she tell them that home was gone, that the world had shifted and they could never go back to what they were? "I do not know," she said honestly. "But I will visit as often as I can. And you are safe here, with food and warmth and people who care for you. That is what matters." They talked for hours. Her children told her about their days, their lessons, the new friends they had made. They seemed happy or at least content, and that eased some of the guilt that had been gnawing at her. She had made the right choice. Whatever else happened, her children were surviving, even thriving, and that was worth any price she had to pay. When it was time to leave, the parting was painful. Her daughter cried, clinging to her skirts. Her son stood very still, fighting his own tears. The blood woman held them both, whispering promises and reassurances she was not sure she could keep. "I love you," she told them. "Always. No matter what happens, no matter where I am, you are my heart. Never forget that." They promised they would not forget. She kissed them both and forced herself to walk away, to climb back into the carriage and let it carry her away from them. She did not look back. If she looked back, she would shatter. The Alpha was waiting for her when she returned to the castle. He took one look at her face and pulled her into his arms without a word. She did not cry. She had no tears left, but she let him hold her, let his solid presence anchor her to this new reality she had chosen. "They are well," she said into his chest. "They are happy." "Good," he said simply. "But I am not their mother anymore. Not really. I am someone who visits, someone they are beginning to forget. Every day I am away, I lose a little more of them." He pulled back to look at her face. "Would you rather go back? Live with them? Resume your old life?" "I would not stop you." She considered this. It was a genuine offer. She could see that in his eyes. He would let her go if she chose. She would lose the castle, the safety, the strange partnership they had built, but she would have her children. "No," she said finally. "As much as it hurts, no. Because in that life, we were always one bad winter away from starvation. Here they have a future. They can learn and grow and become something more. And She paused, surprised by what she was about to say. "I am becoming something more too. Not better perhaps, but more." He kissed her forehead. "You were always more. You just did not know it." She wanted to believe him. She tried to believe him. But belief was a luxury she had never been able to afford. The seasons turned. Summer brought heat that made the castle stones sweat. Autumn painted the valley in gold and crimson. Winter came with snow that covered everything in white silence. And through it all, the Blood Woman learned the rhythms of her new life. She learned to read the subtle politics of the court, to understand who held real power and who merely pretended. She learned which servants could be trusted and which were spies for various factions. She learned the art of appearing while revealing nothing, of smiling while thinking murderous thoughts. She also learned about the Alpha's world, the ancient traditions, the blood bonds that tied vampire families together, the complex web of alliances and enmities that stretched back centuries. She learned that he was older than she had imagined, that he had seen empires rise and fall, that his power was built on the bones of countless forgotten conflicts. She learned that he was lonely in ways she could barely comprehend, isolated by time and power and the fundamental alienness of what he was. They grew closer, but never easy. There was always a distance between them, a gap that could not quite be bridged. He was a vampire, ancient and cold, his heart beating slower than any human heart. She was mortal, temporary, destined to age and die while he remained unchanged. They both knew how this story ended. Every moment together was borrowed time, stolen from the inevitable. But they did not speak of endings. They spoke instead of small things. Books they had read, observations about the court, memories of other times. They built a relationship not on grand passion but on quiet understanding, on the companionship of two people who had found unexpected shelter in each other. The Blood Woman visited her children every few months. Each time they seemed a little more distant, a little less hers. Her daughter was growing into a young woman, serious and studious. Her son was developing interests she did not fully understand. Music and mathematics, abstract things that had never been part of her world. They still loved her, she could see that, but the love was changing, becoming more formal, more dutiful. She was becoming a visitor in their lives rather than the center of them. It hurt, but she accepted it. This was the price she had paid for their safety. They would have futures she could never have imagined for them. They would be educated, cultured, able to move through the world with confidence. They would never know the desperation that had defined her life. And if the cost was her relationship with them, well, she had made that bargain knowingly. 2 years passed in this way. The Blood Woman turned 25, then 26. Her face remained young, but she felt ancient. The Alpha seemed unchanged, as if time did not touch him at all. Sometimes she would watch him sleeping, though he did not sleep often, and marvel at his stillness, at the way he seemed like a statue more than a man. "What are you thinking?" he asked one night, catching her staring. "I am thinking about time," she said. "About how it moves differently for us. You have centuries behind you and centuries ahead. I have perhaps 40 or 50 years left, if I am lucky. We exist in different scales. Does that frighten you? No, it makes me sad. All of this... She gestured vaguely at the room, the castle, the life they had built together. All of this is temporary. I will age and die, and you will continue. One day, I will be just a memory, a footnote in your very long life. The woman who sold blood. The woman you kept for a few years, forgettable. He sat up, his face serious. You will never be forgettable. And yes, you will age and die. That is the nature of mortality. But do not dismiss what we have because it is temporary. Everything is temporary. Love, power, empires, they all end eventually. The question is not how long something lasts, but what it means while it does. And what does this mean? She asked, genuinely curious. He thought for a long moment. It means I am not alone. For the first time in longer than I can remember, I am not alone. That is worth any eventual pain of loss. She reached for his hand and held it, feeling the coolness of his skin against her warmth. I hope you remember that when I am gone. I hope you remember that it was worth it. I will, he promised. I will remember everything. Another year passed. The blood woman was 27 now, and she noticed the first small signs of aging, a line at the corner of her eye, a strand of silver in her dark hair. The Alpha, of course, remained exactly as he was. She tried not to think about the future, about the growing gap between them. She focused instead on the present, on the moments they had. But the present had a way of intruding. A new threat emerged from the east, a rival vampire lord who questioned the Alpha's authority and began gathering allies. War seemed inevitable. The castle became a place of strategy meetings and military preparations. The Alpha grew more distant, consumed by the demands of leadership. The blood woman watched from the margins, understanding that she had no place in these discussions. She was not a warrior or a strategist. She was simply the woman who had once sold blood, the peasant who had somehow ended up in a castle. Her opinion was not sought, her counsel not requested. She was decorative, symbolic, but ultimately irrelevant to the real business of power. It stung more than she wanted to admit. She had grown accustomed to being included, to having her thoughts valued. But now when things became serious, she was set aside like a pretty ornament, too fragile for the real world. One night, unable to sleep, she wandered the castle and found herself outside the war room where the Alpha and his generals were meeting. She did not mean to eavesdrop, but the door was slightly ajar, and she could hear their voices clearly. The woman is a liability, one general said. If the Eastern Lord learns of her, he will use her against you. She is your weakness. Then we increase her security, the Alpha said, or we remove her from the castle entirely. Send her away for her own safety. And yours. There was a long pause. The blood woman held her breath, waiting. No, the Alpha said finally. She stays. My lord, with respect, she stays. This discussion is over. The blood woman turned and walked away before she could hear more. She returned to her tower room and sat by the window looking out at the stars. She was a liability, a weakness, something to be protected or removed. Never an asset, never a strength. Just a complication in the serious business of war and power. She thought about leaving. She could slip away in the night, return to the city, try to rebuild some kind of life with her children. The Alpha had said he would not stop her, but even as she considered it, she knew she would not go. Not because she was afraid, and not because she had nowhere else to go, but because despite everything, despite the distance and the politics and the approaching war, this was where she had chosen to be. This was the life she had built, strange and difficult as it was. The Alpha came to her later that night. He looked exhausted, shadows under his eyes, his usual composure frayed. You heard, he said. It was not a question. I heard. And I understand. I am a liability. It is the truth. He crossed the room and took her face in his hands. You are not a liability. You are the only thing in this God's-damned castle that I actually care about. Everything else, the power, the territory, the endless political games, they are just noise. You are what matters. Then why do I feel so useless? The words came out before she could stop them. Why do I feel like I am just here to be protected and hidden and kept safe like some fragile treasure? I am not fragile. I am not helpless. I survived poverty and desperation and selling my own blood to feed my children. I am stronger than any of your courtiers. But no one sees that. No one asks what I think or what I know. I am just the blood woman, the curiosity, the Alpha's pet. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You are right, and I am sorry. I have been so focused on keeping you safe that I forgot to let you be strong. Tell me, what do you think? About the Eastern Lord, about the approaching conflict?" She was so surprised by the question that it took her a moment to gather her thoughts. When she finally spoke, the words came slowly, carefully. "I think you are approaching this like a military problem. But it is not a military problem. It is a political one. The Eastern Lord does not want to destroy you. He wants to replace you. He wants your allies, your territory, your legitimacy. So you need to undermine his credibility, show that he is not fit to lead. You need to win the hearts of the people, not just the loyalty of the generals." The Alpha studied her face. "Go on." "The people of this realm see you as distant, untouchable. They fear you, but they do not love you. The Eastern Lord is offering them something different, someone who seems more human, more accessible, someone who promises change. If you want to defeat him, you need to give the people a reason to choose you. You need to show them that power can exist alongside mercy, that strength does not require cruelty." "And how do I do that?" She took a deep breath. "You start by acknowledging me, publicly, formally, not as a mistress or a curiosity, but as someone who has your respect. You show the court and the realm that a peasant woman can stand beside an Alpha, and the world does not end. You show them that hierarchy is not as rigid as they believe, that value comes from character, not bloodline. It will not win over everyone, but it will win over enough. The Eastern Lord offers them tradition. You offer them the possibility of something new." He was quiet for a long time, his eyes searching hers. Finally, he smiled, a real smile, warm and genuine. "You are brilliant, and I have been a fool not to listen to you before." "So you will do it?" "I will do it. Tomorrow, at the Gathering of Lords, I will make the announcement. You will stand beside me not as a protected charge, but as my counselor, as someone whose wisdom I value and whose strength I respect. We will face the Eastern Lord together." She felt something unfurl in her chest. Not quite hope, but something close to it. "It will be a scandal. Good, let them be scandalized. Let them rage and protest and clutch their pearls. The world is changing whether they like it or not. We might as well be the ones leading the change." The next day, the Gathering of Lords convened in the Great Hall. Vampire nobles from across the realm had assembled to discuss the threat from the east. The hall was packed with powerful men and women, all of them ancient, all of them secure in their positions. The air hummed with tension and barely suppressed violence. The Blood Woman stood behind a pillar watching. She had not been invited to attend. Women rarely were, and certainly not peasant women with no title or lineage. But the Alpha had told her to be ready, so she waited, heart pounding. The debate went on for hours. Strategies were proposed and rejected. Alliances were discussed. The Eastern Lord's weaknesses were analysed. It was all very civilized, very rational, very removed from the reality of the people who would actually suffer if war came. Finally, the Alpha stood. The room fell silent. "Lords and ladies," he began, "we have discussed military strategies and political alliances. We have talked about defending our territories and preserving our way of life. But we have not discussed why the Eastern Lord has gained such support, why so many are willing to follow him. And until we understand that, we cannot truly defeat him." Murmurs ran through the hall. The Alpha continued. "He offers something we do not, the promise of change. The people of this realm are tired of the old ways, tired of rigid hierarchies and ancient prejudices. They want to believe that merit can triumph over birth, that strength can come from unexpected places. And if we cannot offer them that vision, we will lose. Not because we are weaker, but because we are irrelevant." "What are you proposing?" one lord asked. "I am proposing that we adapt, that we prove we are not so calcified that we cannot change. And I am starting with myself." He turned toward where she stood hidden. "Come forward." The Blood Woman's heart stopped. For a moment she could not move. Then she forced her feet to carry her out from behind the pillar, across the expanse of floor to stand beside the Alpha in front of all those ancient, powerful beings. The shock in the hall was palpable. Whispers erupted into outraged exclamations. Someone shouted about impropriety. Lady Violet, who had replaced Lady Evelina as the arbiter of court propriety, stood up in protest. The Alpha raised his hand, and silence fell like a curtain. "This woman," he said, "has advised me with more wisdom than most of you combined. She has seen the world from the bottom, understands the struggles of common people, knows what they want and need. She has survived things that would have destroyed most of us. And she has my respect and my trust. From this day forward, she will be recognized as my counselor with all the rights and privileges that entails. Anyone who questions her authority questions mine." The silence that followed was absolute. The Blood Woman stood perfectly still, feeling hundreds of eyes on her, feeling the weight of centuries of tradition pressing down. But she did not lower her gaze. She looked out at those powerful faces and saw the future rearranging itself around her. "This is madness," someone finally said. "Perhaps," the Alpha agreed. "Or perhaps it is the only sane response to a changing world. The Eastern Lord offers false promises. We offer real change. Let history judge which was wiser." The gathering ended in chaos, some lords storming out in protest, others staying to argue, still others watching with calculating eyes as they reassessed their positions. But it was done. The announcement had been made. The Blood Woman was no longer a secret or a shame. She was official, recognized, given power. She should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt terrified. She had just been painted as the largest possible target. Every enemy of the Alpha, every rival, every traditionalist who wanted to see him fall, they would all come for her now. That night, alone in her tower room, she finally allowed herself to shake. She had asked for this, had suggested this path, but now that it was real, the magnitude of it overwhelmed her. She was just a woman who had sold blood to feed her children. How had she ended up here, at the center of vampire politics, helping shape the future of an entire realm? The Alpha found her there, trembling by the window. He did not ask if she was all right. He could see that she was not. He simply pulled her into his arms and held her while she fought to regain her composure. "I have made you a target," he said quietly. "I am sorry." "I made myself a target," she corrected. "I knew what I was asking for. I just did not expect it to feel like this." "Like what?" "Like standing on the edge of a cliff waiting to fall." He pulled back to look at her. "You will not fall. I will not let you." She almost believed him. Almost. But she had lived too long in the real world to trust promises even from him. The war with the Eastern Lord came, but it was not the war anyone expected. It was not fought with armies and blood, but with words and symbols and carefully crafted messages. The Alpha used every tool at his disposal, including the Blood Woman. She began appearing at public gatherings, speaking to common people, listening to their concerns, carrying their voices back to the castle. She became a bridge between the ruling class and the ruled, between ancient power and modern possibility. It was exhausting, dangerous work. There were more assassination attempts. She survived 2 more knife attacks and 1 poisoning attempt. She learned to taste her food carefully, to check her rooms for intruders, to sleep with one eye open. But she also learned that she was good at this, better than she had any right to be. She understood people in ways the nobles never would. She could read a crowd, sense what they needed to hear, find the words that would reach them. Slowly, the tide began to turn. The Eastern Lord's support eroded as people saw a different possibility in the Alpha's realm. A place where change was possible, where merit could be recognized, where the rigid hierarchies might bend if not break. It was not a revolution, not even close, but it was the beginning of something. The Eastern Lord, seeing his advantage slipping, made one final move. He challenged the Alpha to single combat, a traditional duel that would settle the matter once and for all. The Alpha accepted. The Blood Woman wanted to protest, to argue that this was foolish and dangerous, but she understood that some things were inevitable. This was one of them. The duel took place at midnight in a neutral territory witnessed by lords from both sides. The Blood Woman stood among the crowd, her heart in her throat, watching as the 2 vampires circled each other like ancient predators. The fight was brutal, beautiful, terrible, a dance of violence that spoke of centuries of skill and power. Blood flowed, bones cracked. The earth itself seemed to tremble. In the end, the Alpha won. The Eastern Lord fell, not dead but defeated, his challenge rejected by fate itself. The gathered lords acknowledged the Alpha's victory, and the threat passed. The realm was secure, but victory came with costs. The Alpha was injured, not mortally, but seriously. He returned to the castle and spent weeks healing, his supernatural metabolism working to repair the damage. The Blood Woman stayed by his side, reading to him, talking to him, simply being present as he recovered. Was it worth it? She asked one night as he lay in bed, still pale from blood loss. Yes, he said without hesitation. We changed something. Not everything, not even most things, but something. The world is different now than it was. That is worth any price, she wanted to argue. Wanted to say that his life was worth more than political change, but she understood that for him, this was life. The exercise of power, the shaping of the future, the endless struggle to matter in a world that would outlive them all. He recovered slowly, but fully. The seasons turned again. The Blood Woman was 29 now, no longer young, the first real signs of aging appearing in her face and body. The Alpha remained unchanged, ageless, perfect. The gap between them widened with each passing day. She visited her children less frequently now. Her daughter was engaged to be married, a good match with a merchant's son. Her son was studying at a university, pursuing abstract mathematics that the Blood Woman could not begin to understand. They had grown into people she barely recognized, and she was happy for them, even as it hurt. They have good lives, she told the Alpha. That was the point. That was always the point. But you are lonely, he observed. Yes, she admitted. I am lonely. I am proud of them, grateful they are safe and happy and becoming themselves. But I am lonely. He held her, and she let herself be held, and outside the seasons turned and the world continued its ancient patterns. 5 more years passed. The Blood Woman was 34 now, distinctly middle-aged, her hair silver-shot, her face lined with experience. She had become a fixture of the court, respected if not entirely accepted, her counsel sought on matters both great and small. She had achieved something remarkable, a peasant woman with real power in a world that should have crushed her. But the achievement felt hollow sometimes, a victory that tasted like ash. The Alpha loved her. She believed that now, though he had never said the words. But it was a tragic love, doomed from the start by the simple fact of mortality. She was aging while he remained frozen in time. Soon she would be old, then frail, then dead. And he would continue, unchanged, until the end of days. They did not talk about it. What was there to say? They simply continued day by day, finding what joy they could in the present and trying not to think about the inevitable future. One night, as they lay in bed, she said, I want you to promise me something. Anything. When I die, and I will die, we both know that, I want you to remember me as I am now. Not as I will become in my final years. Not old and sick and diminished, but like this, lying beside you, still strong enough to matter. His hand found hers in the darkness. I will remember all of you. Every stage, every moment. That is the burden and the gift of immortality. Perfect memory. I will remember the woman who sold blood in the market, and the woman who walked into my castle with nothing but dignity, and the woman who changed the world by refusing to be diminished. All of you. Always. She turned to face him, and in the dim light, she could see tears on his face. She had never seen him cry before. She reached up and touched his cheek, feeling the wetness there. Do not mourn me yet, she said gently. I am still here. I know. But I am already beginning to lose you. Time is a thief, and it is stealing you from me one day at a time. Then let us not waste what we have. Let us be present. Let us find joy in these moments while we still can. He kissed her, tasting of salt and sorrow and something that might have been hope. They made love slowly, gently, 2 people holding each other against the inevitable darkness. And for a while at least, time seemed to slow and the present was enough. The years continued their march. The Blood Woman grew older, her body slowly failing in the ways that all mortal bodies must. She developed pain in her joints, lost the easy mobility of youth, needed more rest than she once had. But her mind remained sharp and her will remained unbroken. She continued her work, continued advising the Alpha, continued being a voice for those who had no voice. On her 40th birthday, the castle threw a celebration. It was a strange affair, a party for someone who would be dead in a few decades, thrown by beings who would live for centuries. But it was genuine, and the Blood Woman appreciated the gesture. She stood in the Great Hall, surrounded by nobles who had once scorned her, and she felt something like contentment. The Alpha gave her a gift, a pendant with a stone the color of blood. "So you never forget where you came from," he said. "And so I never forget what really matters." She wore it always after that, a reminder of the journey she had taken, the impossible distance she had travelled from market stall to castle hall. More years passed. 42, 43, 45. The Blood Woman's children grew into full adults, with children of their own. She was a grandmother now, though she saw her grandchildren rarely. They called her the lady from the castle and treated her with distant respect. She was a stranger to them, a figure from stories, not a real person they knew and loved. It hurt, but she had made her choice long ago. She had traded proximity for security, presence for possibility. Her children and grandchildren would never know hunger, never know the desperation that had defined her early life. That was the bargain, and she had kept her end of it. The Alpha grew more protective as she aged, worried about every cough, every stumble, every sign of declining health. She found it both touching and frustrating. "I am not going to shatter," she told him one day. "I am just getting old. It is what humans do. I know, but I am not ready. I will never be ready." She took his hand and held it, her skin now papery and marked with age spots, his still smooth and ageless. No one is ever ready. That is the nature of loss. But it will come anyway, and all we can do is love each other in the time we have. On her 48th birthday, she became ill. Nothing dramatic, just a fever that would not break, a weakness that settled into her bones. The castle physicians did what they could, but they all knew the truth. She was dying. Not today, not tomorrow, but soon. The body that had survived so much was finally giving up. The Alpha did not leave her side. He sat by her bed day and night, holding her hand, talking to her, reading to her. Sometimes she was lucid and they would have real conversations. Sometimes she drifted in and out of awareness, lost in fever dreams. But always, he was there. "I am afraid," she admitted one night when the fever was particularly high. "I am afraid of not existing. Of all of this, all of me just disappearing into nothing." "You will not disappear," he promised. "I will carry you with me. Every word you spoke, every lesson you taught, every moment we shared, I will carry all of it. You will live on in me, in the changes you made to this world, in the lives you touched. That is a kind of immortality. It is not the same as living. No, but it is something. And something is better than nothing." She smiled at that, a weak but genuine smile. Practical to the end. "That is why I love you." It was the first time she had said the words aloud. He stilled, his hand tightening on hers. "I love you too," he said, and his voice broke on the words. "I did not think I could. I did not think I remembered how. But you taught me. You taught me so much." She drifted off to sleep then, comforted by his presence and his words. When she woke, it was late afternoon. The light coming through the window was golden and warm. The Alpha was still there, his head resting on the edge of her bed, his hand holding hers. She looked at him, this impossible man who had changed her life in ways both wonderful and terrible. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from selling blood in market alleys to dying in a castle tower. It had been a strange life, full of pain and joy and everything in between. She had no regrets. Not really. She had survived. She had mattered. That was more than most people ever got. "I am ready," she whispered. He lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed and ancient with sorrow. "I am not. I know. But it is time anyway." He climbed into the bed beside her, gathering her carefully into his arms. She rested her head on his chest and listened to his slow heartbeat. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the world in shades of amber and crimson. The valley below was beautiful, vast, full of life continuing its eternal patterns. "Thank you," she said, "for seeing me, for choosing me, for letting me matter. Thank you for teaching me how to be something more than a monster. Thank you for your strength and your wisdom and your ridiculous, beautiful insistence on surviving. Thank you for every moment, every word, every breath we shared." She smiled. "We were quite something, were we not?" "We were everything." The sun set. The stars came out. And in that tower room, held in the arms of someone who loved her, the woman who had once sold blood to feed her children finally let go. She slipped away quietly, gently, like a sigh released into the wind. And the Alpha held her as she went, his tears falling onto her still face, his grief as ancient and endless as his life. He sat with her body for 3 days, unable to let go, unable to accept that she was truly gone. The castle moved around him, life continuing as it always did, but he remained frozen in that moment of loss. Finally, on the 3rd day, he rose. He bathed her body himself, dressed her in the crimson gown she had worn the night she became his counselor, placed the blood-red pendant around her neck. Then he carried her down to the valley, to a place where wildflowers grew and the sun touched the earth with gentle hands. He buried her there, under an oak tree that would stand for centuries, marked her grave with a stone that bore only her name and the years of her life. He stood there for a long time, looking down at the fresh earth, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down on him. She had been right, time was a thief. It had stolen her from him one day at a time, and now she was gone completely. But she was also right that something remained. The memory of her was vivid, immediate, as real as if she was still standing beside him. He would carry her with him. Through the years and decades and centuries to come, he would carry her. And maybe that was a kind of immortality after all. He returned to the castle as the sun set. The court was waiting, watching, wondering what he would do now. He looked at them, these nobles with their ancient bloodlines and carefully preserved hierarchies, and he felt nothing but contempt and pity. The woman who lies in the valley below changed this world more in her brief life than any of you will in your endless existence, he said. Remember that. Remember her. And remember that power without humanity is just dust waiting to scatter. Then he walked past them, up to his chambers, where he would sit alone and remember the woman who had sold blood, who had survived against all odds, who had taught an ancient monster how to feel human again. He would remember her strength and her dignity and her quiet refusal to be diminished. He would remember the sound of her voice and the warmth of her touch and the way she looked at him without fear or awe, just seeing him for what he truly was. He would remember. It was the only gift he had left to give her, so he would remember everything, perfectly, eternally, until the end of time itself. And in the valley below, wildflowers grew over her grave and the seasons turned, and life continued its ancient dance. The woman who sold blood was gone, but what she had built, the changes she had made, the lives she had touched, the impossible bridge she had constructed between power and humanity, that remained. That would always remain. If this story found a reflection in you, leave a comment and share it. Sometimes the quietest pain is the most human.